Hello everyone and welcome to Big Rock Moto. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'd like to start this review out by talking just briefly about cars. If you're around my age or a little bit older, you may recall a company called Hyundai attempted to sell cars here in the 80s and 90s with models like the Hyundai Excel. Now, due to many issues with quality control and reliability, these Hyundais became the butt of many jokes alongside other failed brands like Yugo. However, in the 30 or so years since then, Hyundai have become the third largest automaker in the entire world. Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis cars have garnered international acclaim for being some of the best cars out there, and part of the reason for their rise in popularity has been the combination of technology, features, and a great warranty, all coming in at a great price point. Now that brings me back to today, 2024. Our purchasing power as consumers is continually being eroded by high inflation, and we're looking to get more motorcycle for our dollar. So enter a company like CFMOTO. By manufacturing, producing these motorcycles in China, where labor costs are cheaper, they're able to pass those savings along to consumers in countries like here in the USA. Today, I'm reviewing two sporty naked middleweight bikes from CFMOTO, the 450NK and the 800NK, with brand name componentry and styling done by Italians and 2-year warranties. The question is, are these CFMOTOs good enough to challenge the mainstream Japanese and European motorcycle brands? All right, as we get into this review, I have a question for you, so put your answer down below in the comments. It's 2024 and you're going out to purchase a new motorcycle. Would you honestly consider a CFMOTO versus the more mainstream established motorcycle brands? Please let me know down in the comments below. I think it'll be a good discussion. All right, I think we should talk briefly about the history of CFMOTO. All right, so based in China, CFMOTO started making engines in 1989, and then in 2002, they finally brought ATVs into the US market, and since then really have become quite successful in the ATV and side-by-side market. Fast forward to 2022, they finally introduced motorcycles into the US market, and for 2024, they actually list 11 different models on their website. CFMOTO has over 600 dealers in the United States, with about half of those now carrying, or about 300 of those now carrying, the motorcycle line. I know of major interest to people is the upcoming, well, not really upcoming depending on where you are in the world, 450 MT or Ibex 450 adventure bike. Now the cool thing about that is that has the engine from this 450NK. So all the amazing things I'm going to say in this video about this little 450 engine are going to be true of the 450 MT or the Ibex 450. So as soon as the Ibex or the MT 450 arrives in the United States, I will be riding it, reviewing it as soon as I can get my hands on it, but they are not in the United States yet. So that's how motorcycles are in the world. Sometimes they get rolled out to other countries before they arrive here in the USA. So stay tuned for that. Okay, let's talk briefly about the ergonomics and riding positions on these bikes. Seat height is 31.3 inches or just under 800 millimeters. Pretty reasonable. Now, let me show you the riding position. So I kind of expected the riding positions to be kind of really like cramped or sporty sport bike, but they're really not. I mean, you look here, I have a really, pretty comfortable bend in my leg, pretty good leg room, and the overall position of riding is pretty upright. So it doesn't force you into like a sport bikey thing. It's really quite comfortable to ride. We did some rides on these bikes that were like 4 or 5 hours long, and we were relatively comfortable. Of course, there's no wind protection because these are naked bikes, hence the name naked bike. But overall, I find the ergonomics to be quite roomy. I mean, you've got tubular handlebars, good leg room. It doesn't feel cramped. In fact, both of these bikes are quite a bit more comfortable than the MT-09 that I owned last year. All right, let's cover the specs briefly, starting with the 450NK. The 450 is $5,399 with a 2-year warranty here in the United States. Wet weight is 364 pounds or 165 kilograms. Fuel capacity is 3.7 gallons or 14 liters, which gives you a range about 150 miles or 240 kilometers. You've got a parallel twin 270-degree crank engine, right around that 450cc mark. Power is 50 horsepower at 9,500 RPM. Torque is 29 foot-pounds or 39 newton meters at 7,600 RPM. Transmission is a 6-speed with slip assist chain drive, and you do not get a quick shifter on either of these bikes, although it's optional on the 800. Suspension on the 450NK is pretty basic. You don't have any adjustments except for a preload adjustment on the rear. Brakes, you get a radial mount single piston, single disc, 320 millimeter disc in the front with a 4-piston caliper. It's actually pretty good for a bike in this category. ABS is standard, and then rear, you're getting a 1-piston caliper with a 220 millimeter rotor. Now, electronics on the 450 are pretty basic. It does have traction control, which is surprising because the 800 does not. And then you do get ABS, but you don't get anything like ride modes or cruise control or anything like that. All right, let's cover specs on the 800NK. 8,499, 2-year warranty. Wet weight is 410 pounds or 186 kilograms, so quite a bit heavier, than its smaller 450 cousin. Parallel twin, it's a 285-degree crank, so it has that grittier, kind of more coarse sound to it, and it delivers power in kind of an explosive manner, really quick. Fuel capacity is a little bit bigger, 4 gallons or 15 liters, so you have a range of, around 180 miles or 290 kilometers, depending on how you ride. Power out of this thing is around 100 horsepower at 9,500 RPM. Torque is 60 foot-pounds or 81 newton meters at 8,000 RPM. Transmission is 6-speed with a slip assist clutch, chain drive, and you do not get a quick shifter, but you can get one from CFMOTO. Suspension is a lot better on the 800, so you do have rebound and compression adjustments in the front, and it looks like you have preload adjusters as well. And then in the back, you have preload and rebound, but no compression adjustment on the rear shock. Brakes are pretty decent on this bike. They're J1. Actually, the brakes on both bikes are by J1. And on the 800, you get dual 320 millimeter discs as opposed to the single disc over there on the 450. 4-piston J1 calipers. And then you get 260 millimeter with 2-piston at the back. ABS is, of course, standard. Now, electronics on the 800, you get ABS, like we said. You get cruise control standard, which is fantastic, especially at this price, but there's no traction control. I find the lack of traction control quite odd on the 800. All right, let's do a brief walk around. We'll start with the 800NK front fender. We've talked about this kind of stuff already. The lighting, I want to show you the lighting elements. So you've got this LED running light. It kind of, I don't know what it reminds me of, but it definitely reminds me of something. I just can't place it. And then you've got the turn signals are LED, and then the high and low beam are LED lights in here. I kind of like it. It's kind of a pretty aggressive styling. I don't know if it reminds me of KTM a little bit. I think I actually like this one a little bit better. And then the lights on the back. So CFMOTO chose with the 800 to go with this kind of rear fender that attaches to like the rear swing arm. So it's detached from this part. So you can see the tail light up there, and then you can see the turn signals and number plate holder and everything are back here with LED turn signals. Okay, we mentioned adjustability on the suspension, which is great. We talked about the brakes already. You can see the styling element, which I like. You can see the engine here, which looks just like the KTM engine that it really is based on, or really, I guess CFMOTO and KTM kind of share this architecture now. You can see the pegs, the controls, pretty good. Passenger pegs come off the frame here with this kind of removable bracket, which I like how they integrated this. The overall build quality and construction quality, it feels really high level on this. It does not feel at all like you're giving anything up to a Japanese bike or European bike, and I'm really serious about that. Like, it's very impressive, the fit and finish and the build of everything. I mean, even look at the exhaust, how they kind of gave you the twin tips coming out. You can see here, I mentioned this is attached to the swing arm. You can see a rear disc there. Not much else to report. Of course, you've got your chain drive. You can see the mechanism there for the shifting. And I suppose if you had a quick shifter, something would maybe be installed there. I'm not really sure if it needs additional hardware, but I would definitely want a quick shifter if this was my bike. Seating on these bikes is quite impressive, especially for the rider. They're not really prioritized for passengers, of course, but the rider seats are very wide and quite supportive, and I found them to be above average in terms of comfort, especially for a bike in a naked category like this. They've got kind of some cool NK logo and some little embossed kind of things there. Fuel tank, 800 NK logo, and then looking at the controls on the 800, so we've got our cruise control, our menu system, riding modes. The buttons have a nice, they feel a little squishy, but they have decent feedback. I actually really like the switchgear on this bike. You've got hazard lights here. The mirrors are pretty nice looking. And initially I thought they didn't adjust up and down, but they're just very stiff. They do adjust in all directions like you would expect. And then the TFTs on these bikes are quite impressive in my opinion. They're very like crisp and clear, and they have really good contrast. They're decent size. And then to control everything on these bikes, the user interface with your buttons here and your modes and going into the menus and doing things is really one of the most, and this does have music control, phone integration. You can see here vehicle info, telephone. It's got a QR code to connect right into the app for CFMOTO. So you can do phone calls and things like that and connect your communicator and your helmet. But you know, going through and navigating things here is very, very straightforward, to actually one of the best in the business. It's super intuitive to use. I'm really impressed with that. Now let me go back out here. So if I change riding modes, oh, it says exit cruise control. Okay. So if I change riding modes, what you'll see is, okay, rain gives you a different graphic, street gives you a different graphic, and then sport. Now, I like this tack. This reminds me of the tack on the 450. I like this setup better, but you can't get this in the street riding mode on this bike for some reason, which I don't like, because I didn't really like the layout of the I didn't like this kind of tack like this. I mean, it's fine, whatever. Then you've got info here. You can scroll through on the side. You can change kind of what you display. And you've got fuel gauge, temperature gauge, more info up here. You can scroll through gear position. I mean, temperature. It has everything, and it really looks high quality, especially when you consider the price point of this bike. Doing our walk around of the 450, I don't want to bore you, so a lot of it's kind of similar to the 800 in terms of like the lighting and the styling, some of the stuff. Obviously, we have different components. We've talked about a lot of that. The lighting is similar, except the only difference is, you know, on the back is you've got this attached, the rear number plate holder and turn signals are attached to the upper fender, and they don't come off the swing arm like they do over there on the 800. The exhaust is a bit different. It's lower mounted and it's larger on the 450. The 800 has more of a upswept, sort of smaller, more compact unit. Obviously, you have smaller tires, you have a narrower tires on the 450, and everything's just sort of shrunk down or scaled down. But still, the overall build quality, while it's not quite as good on this as it is on the 800, it's still quite good. And there's nothing here that really screams like cheap or super budget. They even put like a little plastic kind of cosmetic thing down there to kind of hide the exhaust, and overall things look pretty good. The passenger pegs, again, you can remove them with bolts. I like that. In case that gets bent, you don't total out the frame. The seating, the seat's not quite as good on the 450 as the 800, and the passenger seat's not very good either, but again, passenger's not a priority. Seat's still pretty comfortable though for what it is. I was pretty impressed by that. So the 450 has the same mirrors as far as I can tell, as the 800 does. The switchgear is different though. You've got different switchgear. It doesn't feel quite as nice. And of course, we don't have the cruise control. It's still okay. I really appreciate the dash of the 450. You can change this design, and since there's no riding modes, you can go in and manually change the design of the layout of it, which I like. But this is the layout that I kind of prefer on the bike. So you've got temperature, fuel, tachometer, you've got central speedometer, you've got some kickstand warning here, little traction control light, warning lights along the sides, gear position, temperature. You still get all the same information really as you get on the other bike, but just slightly different. Overall, the controls, some of the controls like this switch pod, I think is the same between the two bikes. No, it's not actually, because the hazard lights, which it does have, which is great for a budget bike, are down here. Overall, the cockpit's pretty nice, similar kind of tubular handlebar. Nothing feels cheap or budget, and that's what I keep coming back to. So really appreciate that. And for a bike at this price point, to have a big, bright, contrasty, crisp TFT display with a lot of configuration here. I'll go in here to the menu, kind of similar layout in terms of navigating things, you know, to change your settings. And of course, I love that we have traction control. You can turn that off You can turn off traction control on the bike, which is nice. You know, gear change reminder. You can go and do all this, and it still has the phone connectivity for music and infotainment or navigation or whatever you need to do to connect for that. Control your music from here as well. So they do a great job with this. This is one of the strengths, I think, of CFMOTO is kind of their technology seems to be very good. This navigates better than some bikes at 3 to 4 times the price and is easier to use than some of the premium European or other manufacturers. So kudos to CFMOTO kind of on their displays and kind of user interface. I think it's excellent. The star of the show on the 450 is this engine. Now, other reviewers have talked about it a little bit, but I don't think they've really done it justice. This little parallel twin 450, the thing that is so special about it is because, unlike almost all the competition, they didn't use a boring 180-degree crankshaft, which makes the engine sound like a boring vacuum cleaner. They made a 270-degree crank. So what you get what you get is the sound and feel of a much, much larger engine. It's hard for this to come through in the camera, but the sound that this engine makes is it's fantastic. It is honestly one of the best sounding motorcycles that I've ever ridden. It has such a nice, rumbly, like throaty, deep sound to it. It's just phenomenal. It's phenomenal. The other thing about this engine that's so fantastic is that, I mean, watch this. 8,000 RPM, no vibration. 9,000, 10,000 RPMs, sitting at 10,000 RPM. I don't feel any vibration through the motorcycle. How is that possible? So I think what it is that they put twin balancers in it, and the thing is just unbelievably smooth. It's definitely way smoother than its big brother, the 800, by far. It's much smoother and more refined than that bike. Now, going past the engine, it feels like I'm riding the 800NK or a KTM Duke or anything like that. It feels like that. It's more comfortable than you would think. The other thing I like about this bike as opposed to the 800 is the mirrors are perfectly smooth. You don't get that buzzing, the blurriness in the mirrors that you do on the bigger engine. I mean, it's not a fast motorcycle, but it's quick enough. 50 horsepower is such a nice amount of power to have because you can use all the power, but it's not too much, but it's enough to have fun. And the way this engine delivers power all the way to redline is just, it's something to behold. It's really quite special, and it's rare that we find something this special on kind of a so-called cheap motorcycle. I enjoy riding this bike so much more than the 800. It's not fast like the 800. It's not an adrenaline type of fun. It's not that type. It's the type of fun that is just pleasurable. Now, there are plenty of downsides to this bike.
The biggest downside for me is really just the suspension is very bouncy, very budget, kind of harsh. It's not well controlled. So you have a budget suspension. There might be ways to address that, you know, after you buy it. That is one downside that you have. But, you know, the things that most people care about, the handling is really nice and predictable, but it's also pretty agile. The motor, we've talked about, that's fantastic. Let's talk about the brakes a little bit. You know, the brakes are just okay. I mean, for a budget motorcycle, they're okay. I actually, probably in this class, they're pretty good, because the bike's telling me I'm out of gas, so I don't know. The brake, I should probably check that before I leave the house, right? The brakes are actually pretty good, I think, in this class. It's a pretty big rotor, and it does have that pretty good caliper on it. So they're okay. They're just not great. The thing is, I really like motors like this that like to rev all the way out, and this motor revs out so nicely to 12,000 RPM. These small engines, there's just something about riding a slow bike fast. They always say that, right? Cars or bikes, slow is faster, slow is better, slow is more fun. I think it's true. I mean, on an everyday basis, I have more fun with this. I find it more engaging, not just because it sounds better, but because I can use all of the power. And if you think a 450 isn't going to be fast enough, I guarantee you it really is. I mean, you see, you know, we're at high elevation. It was blasting up to 70, 75 miles an hour, no problem. And it's a joy to do it. Okay, let's ride the 800NK. As you can hopefully see, the 800 is very fast. So on a bike like this, it doesn't weigh a lot and has about 100 horsepower. It has all the power you really want, you know. So my impression of riding the bike is it's more comfortable than I thought it would be. Like, it doesn't feel like riding a sport bike. And the motor is what I expected. The motor feels on this 800 like riding a KTM 790 or 890. I mean, I used to own a KTM 790 Adventure, and it does remind me of that. The on-off fueling, the on-off kind of throttle is a little bit jerky on the 800. It's not perfect. It's not a huge problem. And if you use rain mode or street mode, it's better. If you use the sport mode, it's quite a bit jerkier, so I just don't use the sport mode. A lot of people get the wrong impression about sport modes on motorcycles. I think they have more power. They don't typically. It's very rare that would be the case. So usually all the sport mode does is change the throttle response, and that's the case on this bike. Might make it feel faster, but it's not. It makes the same power in sport and street. It just has a more aggressive throttle response in the sport mode. But overall, this is a pretty nice place to be on the highway. It's pretty relaxed at 60 or 70 miles an hour. Doesn't feel buzzy. The motor, you know, it's got plenty of torque. It's smooth. It's not ultra refined, but it's fairly refined for what it is, I think. I mean, I think CFMOTO has done a good job kind of refining this 790 engine platform versus when KTM, you know, kind of first brought it out. So let's turn up here into the mountains and get a little bit sportier on some of these mountain roads with a little bit less traffic. So on the 800, one thing that I don't like about the 800, and I find it very strange, that it doesn't have traction control. So I really have to be mindful of that. I'm used to riding bikes that do have traction control, and this one does not. And with 100 horsepower, it is something I would really like to see. Woo! Yeah, baby. Okay, that reminds me of one thing. The brakes are just okay. They're not great on this bike. They don't have great feel or great power. They're acceptable, but they're not great. So just be mindful of that. You know, they're okay though. And then the suspension is pretty good, I would say, on this bike. And you have a lot of adjustability with the 800, so I do like that. The only two things I would change about this bike would be adding traction control and then adding a quick shifter. And I believe a quick shifter is a factory accessory. Woo! These motors are a little bit gritty feeling, a little bit gravelly feeling. They're pretty fun. Like they want to party. They're rowdy, you know. It's like it wants to go, and it doesn't really like being short shifted. Like below 4,000 RPM, there's a little bit of roughness to the motor. It's not bad, but it is something you notice. There are smoother, more refined engines out there, but the reward is like above 4,000 RPM and all the way to redline. It makes really good power, and it's really pretty fun to ride. And the exhaust note isn't too bad either. You! Whoa! And then the brakes, you know, the brakes are okay. They're just not great. Show you the roll-on power there. Whoa! Holy moly! One thing I will tell you that I don't like about this bike so much is the mirrors are kind of buzzy. So you get vibration in the mirrors when you're riding the bike, and so it makes the traffic behind you just look really blurry, and it's something that does kind of annoy me. And it's funny because the 450 doesn't do that at all. Yeah, baby. Another feature I like about this bike, I don't know if you could see that, but the turn signals flash, the hazards flash when you brake really, really hard. Well, it didn't do it that time for some reason. Maybe you have to be going. Yeah, see how they indicate? I like that. That's a super nice safety feature to warn traffic behind you that, okay, I'm braking really hard, you know.
All right, well, what are some potential downsides to going with the CFMOTOs? I don't mean that they're bad bikes. They're actually great bikes and extremely competitive with the best out there. But I know that there's thoughts and concerns out there about this. So let's have a discussion in the comments down below. But some potential things to bring up for discussion. And I don't necessarily fully believe in all these. I'm just kind of bringing them up. So CFMOTO, the dealer network is a bit smaller with CFMOTO motorcycles versus, you know, Honda or Kawasaki or something like that. However, they are growing, and there's a lot of ATV dealers that are starting to become motorcycle dealers for CFMOTO. So that could be service, that could be parts, you could have concerns there. Resale value, that would be an honest concern for me, is sort of the resale value. I don't know, you know, how it's going to be with CFMOTO going forward, but, you know, something to think about. Reliability is always a question mark. We don't really know. It seems like the CFMOTOs are pretty reliable so far out there, and other brands have their reliability challenges as well. So I don't know. Let me know what you think about that. And then the fourth thing, which I do think is a bit of a concern for me, is sort of the value proposition. So when I look at the prices of these bikes compared to some of the other bikes, they're a little bit better, but they're not dramatically cheaper. And so I start to think, well, you know, maybe I want to stick with a Japanese or an established European brand if I'm not really having to pay that much more to get it. So to me, I kind of feel like Chinese manufacturing, Chinese labor, I wonder why the prices aren't a little bit less on like the CFMOTOs. But I mean, they do offer a lot of bang for the buck, but I don't know. Let me know what you think about this stuff down below. Okay, let's briefly cover the competition for the 450 and the 800NK. Now, I'm going to put a couple charts here up on the screen, and they might kind of block the whole screen, but I want you to be able to read it. So what I've done is I've made little comparison charts for the 450 and the 800 separately with what I think are the most closest competitors. So why don't we start with the 450? So I think the main competitors that you might be looking at are the Honda CB500F, the Kawasaki Z500, and the KTM Duke 390. Now you can see here the price of the CFMOTO is the cheapest, although the Kawasaki is just a couple $100 more. For the warranty, KTM and CFMOTO both give you a 2-year warranty. Honda and Kawasaki are a 1-year warranty. Horsepower, the CFMOTO's in second place, with Kawasaki making another 1 horsepower, which is kind of negligible. And then in terms of overall weight, actually the CFMOTO does really well. It's right there with the KTM in terms of the lightest bike here, and then you go up to the Kawasaki is about the same too. And then the Honda is just a little bit heavy. I don't know where all the weight's coming from on the Honda, but that bike is about 40 or 50 pounds heavier for some reason. Now, one thing that I mean, it's obvious by now, the thing that sets the CFMOTO apart from the competitors, especially Honda, Kawasaki, bikes like that, is that they use a 270-degree crank for the engine. Sounds better, has more character, smoother, has a rumble to it, feels like a bigger engine, has good low-end grunt, pulls strong. What a fantastic engine. And I just can't help but think how much better something like the Z500 or the Ninja 500 or the CB500F or bikes like that would be if they didn't have those 180-degree cranks that make them kind of sound like a vacuum cleaner. Now for the KTM Duke, those are very good bikes. It is a single cylinder, the 390 Duke. It's been improved for 2024. Lightweight, agile, fun, adjustable suspension. I think the only one in a group that has adjustable suspension. You should definitely look at all these bikes. If I was buying a bike, man, it's tough. If I was buying a bike in a segment, I have to look really hard at the KTM and really hard also at the CFMOTO. I like the CFMOTO engine the best, but there's some things about the KTM I also like, so it'd be a tough choice. Now let's look at the 800NK. So I think, you know, it's the KTM Duke 790, the Triumph Street Triple R 765, and the Suzuki GSX-8S. Now there's definitely other bikes. You could look at a Yamaha MT-07, that should probably be on here. Yamaha MT-09, that's getting a bit more powerful, a bit up there in price, but you could potentially consider that. So in terms of pricing, you know, the CFMOTO at $8,500 does really, really well compared to these other bikes, and you get that 2-year warranty. With something like Suzuki, you only get a 1-year warranty, although KTM and Triumph have 2 years. In terms of horsepower, you're kind of mid-pack here. 100 horsepower is a very respectable number, and of course it shares that. The Duke 790, because the engine's tuned slightly differently, it makes a couple more horsepower, but negligible difference. The Triumph is very powerful at 120 horsepower, and if you start to get up to that $10,000 price point, you should look at an MT-09, which is also around that 120 horsepower mark. In terms of weight, you know, it's interesting. The Suzuki is very heavy, and all the other bikes are kind of around that 410, 415 pound mark. For equipment, the CFMOTO does very well. What I like on the CFMOTO is you get cruise control standard, you get ride modes, and you get ABS, and then you get an optional quick shifter. With the KTM, you get ride modes, traction control, and ABS, but no cruise. The Triumph, you can get cruise, but you have to go up to the RS model. And then the Suzuki, you just get ride modes, ABS, traction control, and quick shifter. Now, what I will say about the CFMOTO in comparison to these other bikes, and I mentioned this, I don't like the fact that we are missing cruise control. We're missing traction control. It does have cruise control, but no traction control. No traction control on a 100 horsepower bike in 2024. That seems very, very odd to me and would push me away from this versus the competition. Final thoughts on the CFMOTO 450NK and 800NK. In this video, not only have we talked about the two distinct models here and really tested them out, but we've also kind of talked about CFMOTO in general and the progress they've made as a motorcycle manufacturer. Here are my thoughts on CFMOTO, just being as honest as I can. I think that any struggles they have are really to do with perception of their reliability or their quality, and certain people being against products or vehicles being manufactured in China. As motorcycles, as consumer products, the way they perform, the quality of them, I think they're right up there with the competition, and I really, really do mean that. And here's what I think too about CFMOTO. Like, they've just brought motorcycles to the United States in 2022. We're here in 2024 and these bikes are already this good. Maybe this isn't Hyundai and Kia. Maybe this is way faster and way more sudden, and maybe we need to be ready for CFMOTO to become really a mainstream motorcycle brand here in the West or here in the United States. And I think it's great if they do, but let me know what you think down below. But overall, I'm really pretty blown away by how good these are. I didn't quite expect them to be this good because they're still kind of new with the motorcycle stuff, especially for Western markets and the US market and kind of our higher expectations and our higher price points and the bikes that we're used to. They've done really, really well. And I can't wait to see what the next 3 to 5 to 10 years brings for CFMOTO and the models, hopefully the exciting, cool models that they're gonna be bringing us. So let me know down in the comments below what you think about these bikes, about the brand in general, and about motorcycles from China in general. You know, my job is to test them out, review them, show you how they work, and try to give you my opinion while staying as unbiased and fair as I can. I hope I've done a good job with that. Please support the work I'm doing here. There's ways to do that down below. Other than that, please ride safe, and I'll see you out there.